important truths, I believe, that we find in here. There's many, many truths in here, and we certainly can't cover them all. But we're looking at Moses' departure. This is Moses' final days we're looking at. In fact, in verse 2 it says, and he said unto them, he said, I am 120 years old this day. It's his birthday, Moses' birthday. Now Moses got a bit of surprise coming up. It's not the best surprise you'd expect on your birthday. But anyway, he said, I can no more go out and come in. Also the Lord has said unto me, thou shalt not go over this Jordan. So he's having a birthday. He's one of the few among us who's got to 120. And it's ready. He's getting ready for his departure. Now in verse 3, he's giving his last messages, his last reminders, his last exhortations to the children of Israel. And this is a wonderful exhortation in verse 3. It says, and the Lord thy God, he will go over before thee, and he will destroy these nations from before thee. And thou shalt possess them, and Joshua, he shall go over before thee, as the Lord hath said. Now, isn't that a wonderful thing when you're, as a Christian, you can know that the Lord's going before you. You know, we're supposed to follow the Lord, supposed to follow Jesus. And what he encourages the people here, he says, I'm going before you. I'm going to be there before you. Well, what an encouragement. And what an encouragement it should be to us each day to know that the Lord is with us. And he's leading us. He's going before us. No surprises to God. So he's going before them to fight the battle. But also he's saying Joshua's going to lead you. See, Moses, this is the transition now from Moses' leadership over to Joshua. In verse 6, wonderful, wonderful motto for each one of us. Be strong and of a good courage. Fear not, nor be afraid of them. For the Lord thy God, he it is that doth go with thee. He will not fail thee, nor forsake thee. And you can see all the New Testament verses there, can't you? I will never leave you nor forsake you. Lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the world. You know, there's just wonderful applications in the New Testament here. So, a motto for today is look like that wonderful verse in Isaiah 40:10, one of my favourites. Be not dismayed, I am thy God. Fear thou not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee, yea, I will help thee, yea, I will uphold thee with the right hand of my righteousness. What a wonderful verse. And what wonderful truths we have there. You're not alone. God's with us. And so, in verse, we're going to move through fairly quickly these chapters. In verse 9 through 13, Moses writes out the law and delivers it unto the priests, which bear the ark of the covenant. Verse 14, and the Lord said unto Moses, behold, thy days approach that thou must die. This is on his birthday too, by the way. Call Joshua and present yourselves in the tabernacle of the congregation, that I may give him a charge. And Moses and Joshua went and presented themselves in the tabernacle of the congregation. So here's this handover of leadership. The handover of leadership from Moses. And Moses has done a wonderful job. He's been faithful. He's put up with a lot. The grumbling, we think pastor puts up with a bit of grumbling now and again. Well, Moses got it for a good on 40 years. From a murmuring lot they were. Now, here's a rather discouraging prophecy, but something that actually happens. And the Lord said unto Moses, behold, thou shalt sleep with thy fathers, and this people will rise up and go a-whoring after the gods of the strangers of the land, whither they go to be among them, and will forsake me and break my covenant which I have made with them. So the Lord is revealing to Moses that these people aren't going to follow me. They're going to slide, they're going to backslide. They're going to forsake me, and they're going to go after the gods of this country they're going to. Now that must have been a great discouragement to Moses, but I think Moses knew enough about them. There was no great surprise what these people are going to do. Now in verses 19 and 21, Moses is told to be a songwriter. Now therefore write ye this song for you, and teach it to the children of Israel. Put it in their mouths, that this song may be a witness for me against the children of Israel. And so God is going to inspire Moses to write a fairly lengthy song. And we look at that in the next chapter. We'll talk more about that when we get there. But he's telling them I want you to memorise this song. I want you to memorise it. I want you to have a very clear understanding of what this song's all about. In verse 20, for when I shall have brought them into the land which I swear unto their fathers, that floweth with milk and honey, and they shall, now this is the important part, and they shall have eaten and filled themselves and waxen fat, then will they turn unto other gods and serve them and provoke me and break my covenant. What he's saying there is there's dangers in prosperity. There's dangers in prosperity. And we're going to look at that a little bit later. We'll just enlarge on that a little bit later after we summarise these chapters. But the same as for them, you've got the same sort of heart. The same as for today, there are dangers in prosperity. Okay, so we continue on. It's interesting, these verses 24 through 26, it says in verse 26, is take the book of the law and put it in the side of the Ark of the Covenant. Now in the Ark of the Covenant, there's also the 2 tablets with the 10 commandments on them. So he's not saying put it in the Ark, he's saying put it in the side of the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord your God, that it may be there for a witness against thee. For I know thy rebellion and thy stiff neck. Behold, I am yet alive with you this day. Ye have been rebellious against the Lord, and how much more after my death? So Moses is making pretty clear that what sort of heart they had. And really all this matter, it's all about the heart, isn't it? The whole story of the children of Israel, it's all about the heart. The whole story of your life is all about your heart. How do you keep your heart? How do I keep my heart? So, chapter 32, the Song of Moses. Now this song, which goes from verse 1 through to verse 42, quite a lengthy song, not a song that we would normally sing, but nonetheless, the whole song embraces the entire history of Israel, their past, their present, and what's going to happen in the future. It just does a quick summation of those 3 points. There are 2 themes in the song, 2 strong, contrasting themes in the song. It tells us about the graciousness and the faithfulness and the mercy and the love of God through this song. And it's like a golden thread going through the whole song. But also, unfortunately, there's a black thread that goes through it, which is entwined with that golden thread, and that's the faithlessness and the disobedience and the apostasy and the forsaking of the Lord of the children of Israel. And it goes right through the whole psalm. And so Moses' song starts off this way. Give ear, O ye heavens, and I will speak, and hear, O earth, the words of my mouth. My doctrine shall drop as the rain, my speech shall distill as the dew, as the small rain upon the tender herb, and as the showers upon the grass. This is his introduction. Because I will publish the name of the Lord. Ascribe ye greatness unto our God. He is the rock. That's an important word in this particular chapter. He is the rock. His work is perfect, for all his ways are judgment. A God of truth and without iniquity, just and right is he. God has never done anything wrong to the children of Israel. He's never done anything wrong to you and I. He's always done good. So Moses wants to establish here, Israel, God is good, God is righteous, God is just, God will always do the right thing. And that's a sad reflection on the hearts of the children of Israel. So we've got Moses' perspective on God's greatness in those first couple of verses. In verses 5 and 6, and we won't read them all, but we start off in verse 5, it says, they have corrupted themselves. That's enough to say that they're foolish people. Those verses 5 and 6 talk about Israel, a foolish people. Verses 17 to 14 says, Moses, the song tells us how God loved them. Remember the days of old in verse 7. Consider the years of many generations. Ask thy father, and he will show thee, thy elders, and they will tell thee. So what he's saying is God has been good. God has always been good to you. When the Most High divided, verse 8, the Most High divided to the nations their inheritance. When he separated the sons of Adam, he set the bounds of the people according to the number of children of Israel. And so God has, as I said before, God has always been good. Verses 15 to 18 tell about the dangers, once again, of prosperity. And we'll look more at this later on, and I'll just enlarge on that later in the message. Verses 19 to 33 tell of their apostasy. They said, where it said, and when the Lord saw it, in verse 19, he abhorred them because of the provoking of his sons, of his daughters, and he said, I will hide my face from them. I will see what their end shall be, for they are very froward generation, children in whom is no faith. That's a challenge to us, isn't it? Because the Bible says the just shall live by faith. And you know, it's so easy today to live without any faith. You can get up and you can go to the fridge and get some food. You can put your clothes on, you can jump in your car and you can drive, whatever you do. We can have a life where there's very little faith involved. Now we can thank God for the food and we can thank God for breath and heartbeats and everything else. But we're told that if you want to be right with God, if you want to please God, you've got to walk by faith. And we need to exercise that faith as much as we can in our prayer life. Okay, so verses 34 through 42, Jehovah's final dealings with Israel. Verse 43, moving through here fairly quickly. 43, rejoice, O ye nations, with this people, for he will avenge the blood of his servants and will render vengeance to his adversaries and will be merciful unto his land and to his people. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. You know, so often we feel wronged by someone or something happens and we don't feel as though we've got the right end of the stick in the deal or whatever it might be. And there's a sort of natural tendency to want to even the table out a little bit. I knew a fellow Christian in Cairns when I was up there, when I was just the first Christian. And this fellow was, you know, you'd poke him like that. Well, he'd want to knock you down the floor and jump on you and stomp on you. He just wanted to just go over the top all the time. In fact, the Lord took him out eventually. He used to stand at the front of his house, and I think it was in Bundaberg, and make mockery of the pastor as he drove. You had to go past his house every Sunday morning. He'd get out and he'd throw mockery and he'd throw abuse at the pastor as he drove past his home. You find that hard to believe. He was a Christian. He was the professing Christian. He said he was a Christian. But anyway, the Lord took him out. He died at a very early age. The Lord will not be mocked. You know, we've got to be careful the way we treat other people. And so in verse 44, Moses' exhortation to obedience, and then the rest of the chapter is talking about verses 48 to 52, Moses' punishment for disobedience. And this is something we'll look at a bit further later on. He's saying in verses 48 through 52, he's telling him to get up to the mountain, Abiram, unto Mount Nebo, which is the land of Moab, which is against Jericho, and behold the land of Canaan, which I will give unto the children of Israel for a possession, and die in the mount. He's telling him, this is still on his birthday, by the way, I want you to go up this mountain, I want you to die in the mount whither thou goest up, and be gathered unto thy people as Aaron and thy brother died in Mount Hor, and was gathered unto his people. And this is the reason. In 51, because ye transgressed against me among the children of Israel at the waters of Meribah Kadesh in the wilderness of Zin, because ye sanctified me not in the midst of the children of Israel. Yet thou shalt see the land before thee, but thou shalt not go thither unto the land which I give to the children of Israel. And so that seems like a pretty harsh judgment on poor old Moses after all that faithful service. But we'll see later on, I'll enlarge on a bit later on, why it was a justified move. And I'll throw out a question now, don't try and answer it right now. Did Moses ever get into the promised land? Anyway, I'll leave that one with you. We'll talk about that later on. We'll just move. Did he ever set foot in the promised land? So, chapter 33. Moses' final blessings to the tribe. Now this is interesting. We're going to very quickly look at this, and it's got a parallel to when Jacob just blessed the tribes, just his children, the tribes of Israel, in Genesis chapter 49. And he went through, he told Reuben, you're as unstable as water, and you know he really just laid it out for them. I'll just go through this very quickly. Verse 6, he gives a blessing to Reuben. Verse 7, he gives a blessing to Judah. Verses 8 to 11, he gives blessings to Levi. Verse 12, he gives a blessing to Benjamin. In verses 13 through 17, the longest blessing and the greatest blessing he gives to Joseph, the tribe of Joseph. In verses 18 to 19, he blesses Zebulun and Issachar. In verses 20 to 21, he blesses Gad. In verse 22, he blesses the tribe of Dan. In verse 23, he blesses the tribe of Naphtali. And in verses 24 to 25, he blesses the tribe of Asher. Can anybody tell me what tribe is missing? You can't say. No answer. What tribe is missing there? There's one tribe missing. Yes? Anybody? No, Levi was there. He was number 3. Simeon. Simeon is missing. Simeon is not mentioned there. Now, the commentators have lots of alternate views on that. However, I think it's fairly conclusive that if you look back in Genesis 49 and read the blessing that he gave Simeon back there, you'll see that Jacob was certainly not pleased with Simeon. Simeon and Levi were the ones that went into that village after their daughter. Now, what was their sister's name? Forgive me. Sister's name? Diana. Right. How she was raped. Remember that? She was raped in Shechem, and they made all the men be circumcised. And the third day, which is the worst day, they went and just killed the lot. Well, it was Levi and Simeon did that, and it was believed that Simeon, because in that Genesis 49, Jacob rebukes him for that action, and he also says you'll be scattered in the tribes. So he doesn't get a particular land. He actually ends up sharing the land with Judah. If you look at the map, and you'll see where the tribes are mentioned, and we've got the map up here, which Linda can't see, so we'll leave it today. The tribes are mentioned. Judah and Simeon have to share the same area. So Simeon doesn't get his own special portion. In verse 26, no, is that verse 26? Where are we now? What chapter? We're in verse 33. Wrong page. Okay. Verse 26, there's a wonderful benediction here. He gives a blessing to everybody. It's a complete blessing over the whole nation. There is none like unto the God of Jeshurun. Now Jeshurun, we're going to look at that a little bit further along. Who rideth upon the heavens in thy help, and in his excellency on the sky. This is a beautiful verse here, 27. The eternal God is thy refuge, and underneath are the everlasting arms. Isn't that wonderful wording? Just I love that. And he shall thrust out the enemy from before thee, and shall say, destroy them. Israel then shall dwell in safety alone. The fountain of Jacob shall be upon a land of corn and wine. Also his heavens shall drop down dew. Happy art thou, O Israel, who is like unto thee, O people, saved by the Lord. And I'm talking to people who have been saved by the Lord. Amen? Have you been saved by the Lord this morning? Amen. Good. Have you been saved by the Lord? I want to hear a bit more enthusiasm than that. Well, I get excited about your salvation. Okay, saved by the Lord. The shield of thy help, and who is the sword of thy excellency, and thy enemies shall be found liars unto thee, and thou shalt tread upon their high places. So that's a very brief look at chapter 33. Now, chapter 34, Moses' death. Now, I don't know whether this still is on Moses' birthday. I'm not sure about that. But anyway, Moses, ever faithful, follows the instructions. Verse 1, and Moses went up from the plains of Moab unto the mountains of Nebo, to the top of Pisgah, that is over against Jericho. And the Lord showed him all the land of Gilead unto Dan, and all Naphtali, and the land of Ephraim and Manasseh, and all the land of Judah unto the utmost sea, and the south and the plain of the valley of Jericho, the city of palms unto Zoar. Now, I think it's in here, it says here, further in this chapter, that, well, maybe it's another chapter. His eyes had not dimmed, and his natural force was still ticky-boo, still going well. His eyes were good, but they were not this good, because he was looking about 160 kilometres from Mount Pisgah. And God gave him supernatural vision. A miracle, a miraculous event happened here. He was able to look 160 kilometres up to where Dan was going to be situated, all around Jericho, all around Jerusalem, all up the coast, and over to Manasseh and Ephraim with a whole lot. He saw it all. He saw it all. And that's not surprising. You know, even the devil took Jesus up and showed him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment. So, you know, supernatural event occurred. In verses 5 and 6, so Moses, here's the key, the servant of the Lord died there in the land of Moab, according to the word of the Lord, and he buried him in the valley in the land of Moab, over against Beth-peor, but no man knoweth of his sepulchre to this day. God is the only person I know in the Bible where God buried him, a person. God actually says he buried him in the valley. And I think that was purposeful, that it was, if they knew where he buried, it would become a place of homage or whatever. They want to, it'd become like an idol. So God made that a mystery. And I know I think it's in Jude, where Michael the archangel and Satan disputed about the body of Moses. Anyway, we won't go there this morning. Verse 7, Moses' testimony. Here it is here. And Moses was 120 years old when he died. His eye was not dimmed, nor his natural force abated. So he was still doing all right, even at 120. In verse 8, they mourned for him 30 days. And in verse 9, this is the full anointing of Joshua. And Joshua the son of Nun was full of the spirit of wisdom, for Moses had laid his hands upon him. And the children of Israel hearkened unto him, and did as the Lord commanded Moses. And verse 10, and there arose not a prophet since in Israel like unto Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face, in all the signs and the wonders which the Lord sent him to do in the land of Egypt, to Pharaoh and to all his servants and to all his land, in all that mighty hand and in all the great terror which Moses showed in the sight of Israel, of all Israel. So Moses was an amazing character. You know, I looked up this morning in my little computer sword searcher. Moses' name is mentioned 784 times in the Bible. And it says there was not a prophet since in Israel. He was a major character in the whole construction of the Bible. I think even in the New Testament he's mentioned about 80 times, 79 times, sorry. So Moses was a very important person in the whole revelation of God's redemption. Now, we're going to move on now. We're going to look at a couple of verses back here. We're going to look at, go back to chapter 32, and we're going to look at verse 15. Now, as you're turning there, 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 11 says, now all these things happened unto them for an example to us, and they are written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the world are come. We've said it's been said before, I'll say it again, what happens in the Old Testament is very relevant to the New Testament. How God's dealings with Israel, we can take parallels to what he does in the New Testament. They're there for example, because they had a heart which fell away from the Lord. You have a heart, I have a heart which could very easily fall away from the Lord. And nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I think I'll backslide today. Oh, I think it's a nice day, I think it's a good day to backslide. It doesn't happen like that. It happens little by little by little by little. Little compromises, little giving up of attendance to church maybe, little prayerlessness, little, we won't worry about the Bible today, I've got lots on. Just little by little. It's very subtle, very deceitful. It'll happen. And I've been in church long enough to see what I thought were good, strong, solid Christians, and they're just right away from the Lord at the present time. I could give you a name, I'm not going to, but I can give you names of those people. They've just gone away. And so don't take God's grace for granted. I think that's the message there. Don't take it for granted. So the application is, in this verse we're going to be looking at is the danger. We're going to look at 2 points: the danger of prosperity and the danger of privileged position. The danger of prosperity and the danger of privileged position. In Deuteronomy, back in chapter 6, God warned them through Moses. He said, beware lest thou forget the Lord. Beware. That's the greatest danger that they faced, and the greatest danger that we faced as we're all prosperous and we're in a land of abundance, we forget the Lord. So in verse 15, this is a very interesting verse, this one, in chapter 32. But Jeshurun waxed fat and kicked. Thou art waxen fat. Thou art grown thick. Thou art covered with fatness. Then he forsook God which made him, and lightly esteemed the rock of his salvation. Now I want you to go back to verse 9. For the Lord's portion is his people. Jacob is the lot of his inheritance. Now this pictures how God found them. He found them in the desert place and in the waste, howling wilderness. He led them about. He instructed him. He kept him as the apple of his eye. As an eagle stirreth up her nest, fluttereth over her young, spreadeth abroad her wings, taketh them and beareth them on her wings. So the Lord alone did lead them, and there was no strange God with him. He made him ride on the high places of the earth, that he might eat the increase of the fields, and he made him to suck honey out of the rock, and oil out of the flinty rock, butter of kine, and milk of sheep, and fat of lambs and rams of the breed of Bashan, and goats, and the fat of kidneys of wheat. Thou didst drink with pure blood of the grape. And then the verse we read, but Jeshurun waxed fat. A very interesting analogy here. God, in this verse 15, is likening Israel to a horse. To a horse. So he found this horse in a howling waste wilderness. Now, I've never seen many fat horses in a howling face wilderness. I've seen a few horses in my day. And so we're talking about a lean steed here. And he's bought this, the symbol of Israel, he's bought this steed out of the wilderness. He's led him out. He's instructed him. The nation of Israel instructed this horse. He's kept him. And it goes on to say how he's looked at. He's cared for him. And he fed him. And he gave him the best of food and the best of oil and all the blessings of butter and milk and all these things. And so he's fed this horse up. And he's fed this horse up until it was so fat. It was covered in fat. And all its senses to what he wanted a horse to do had gone. In fact, it said there in the first part, it says, and Jeshurun waxed fat and kicked. Now, when a horse kicks you, it's sort of saying, go away, leave me alone. I don't want anything to do with you. And that's what happened to Israel. They grew prosperous, they were blessed, they were in abundance, and they lost their sensibility towards God. I don't know about you, but when I've had a really big meal, I felt about the lowest spirituality of my whole life. I'm full as a gug, and you think I feel like going witnessing? You feel like I'm getting down on my knees? No, I'm just like a lizard, just wanting to lie in the sun. Full belly, I'm fine. Now, I don't get fat, and I don't think we're talking about fatness in terms of our body, but we're talking how we can get fat and we can wax dull in our hearing, we can wax dull in our eyes, we can lose our spiritual sensitivity. And, you know, if you want a horse to work, if you want a stock horse to work, you have to have that horse not lean, not skinny, but you need to have it fit. It's no good. When we had sheep on the farm and they were in lamb, we'd put them in a hilly paddock because we didn't want them fat lambing. We don't want them all fat because it's more difficult to give birth. We want them to walking up those hills and getting fit. And so if you've got a horse that's fat, and it's just wants it looking around for its next feed, go away, kick, whatever it might be, that horse is not much good to you. That horse is not much good. It can become fat, lazy, sullen. It didn't want the bridle, it didn't want the saddle, and Israel didn't want the yoke of God on it at that time either. So take the yoke away, I don't want the yoke. It had no vigour, it was just slothful. And we as Christians can become just like that. And I don't know about you, but sometimes the sword of your evangelistic zeal gets a little bit rusty at times. Sometimes we think, I don't think I'll carry a tract today. God might lead me to give it to someone. Our hearts, all this is the heart issue. Keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. We need to protect our heart, to guard our heart, to keep our heart more than anything else in our life. And it says that's so sad. He says, and then he forsook God. This is Israel. The horse forsook his carer, which made him, and lightly esteemed the rock of his salvation. What a sad thing. And that, of course, is pointing towards Jesus Christ when he came. And it says there, he is despised and rejected of men, and we esteemed him not. I didn't quote that verse entirely. But Israel despised Jesus, the rock of their salvation. Now, of course, here it's talking about the rock Jehovah in this particular portion, but they lightly esteemed the rock of their salvation. And we're going to be careful, folks, because as we're prosperous, as we're living in a land of abundance, and you don't even have to work here, you can just get paid for just sitting around doing nothing. There's lots of welfare, and there's all this ability to do nothing. We can lose our appreciation for God. We can lose our appreciation for so great salvation. We can lose our first love. It talks in Revelation chapter 2, I think it is, about talks about, I think it was the Church of Sardis, you have lost your first love. And we now and again need to stop and take an audit of where our heart is. Have I still got that first love, that zeal for the Lord, that desire to see the lost saved, the desire to witness, the desire to pray, desire to get with Christians? And so if Israel was condemned for their lack of spirituality towards God, this lack of sensitivity, how much more us who have so much? We've got the Word, we've got the Holy Spirit, we've got so much God has given us. I'm going to read Proverbs chapter 30 and verses 8 and 9. You can turn there if you wish. Now this was written by Solomon. And Solomon is writing here in chapter 30, Proverbs chapter 30 and verses 8 and 9, verse 7, sorry. He says, 2 things have I required of thee, deny me them not before I die. Now remember, this is Solomon. This is interesting. Remove far from me vanity and lies. Give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with food convenient for me, lest I be full and deny thee, and say, who is the Lord? Or lest I be poor and steal and take the name of my God in vain. Now that's Solomon. Now Solomon, I think, was the wealthiest man, the wisest man, probably the wealthiest man, and certainly wealthy in wives and concubines, that's for sure. I think he had about 700 plus 300 or something. Solomon had that desire, but Solomon was deceived. And he said that his wives took his heart away from the Lord. So something is out there to take your heart away from the Lord. Something's out there to take my heart. And Satan knows your Achilles heel. He knows what will get you. He knew what would get Solomon. More wives. You want more wives, Solomon. Look at her, she's beautiful. Take another wife. Satan's out there to get us. And I mentioned before, the symptoms of this is prayer time. I don't pray as much as I used to, but anyway, that's all right. I don't read my Bible all that much, but just have a little daily bread. That'll do me. That'll get a little snack, a little nip. But that's not enough. I don't really like going out in the street witnessing. That's really just too confronting. It's not my ministry anyway. I don't think I'll be doing that. Carelessness with sin, with the world. All these little things, just little bits, can take us away. Turn, if you would, to Revelation chapter 3. Revelation chapter 3. This is a very, very convicting little passage here we're going to look at. Very convicting. Very challenging. Revelation chapter 3. talking to the Laodicean church. Now, a lot of people have got different ideas on this. Some preachers believe that we're in the Laodicean age now, and I think there's a fair weight of evidence for that, but I'm not going to get into an argument over that. So he's talking to the Laodicean church. And he says in verse 15, he says, I know thy works, that thou art neither hot nor cold. Oh, sorry, I'll read it properly. I know thy works, that thou art neither cold nor hot. I would thou wert cold or hot. So then, because thou art lukewarm and neither cold nor hot, I will spew thee out of my mouth. Because thou sayest, I am rich, and increase with goods, and have need of nothing, and knowest not that thou art wretched, and miserable, and poor, and blind, and naked. What a challenge to our age of abundance. What a challenge to each one of us. You know, the word wretched is another word for miserable. Miserable is another word for pitiful. Poor is beggar, pauper. Blind is everything's opaque, you can't see clearly, nothing's clear, your spiritual senses are gone. And naked means nude, no clothing of righteousness. It's a pretty telling statement, isn't it? It's a pretty challenging statement. And further on he says, I counsel thee to buy of me gold tried in the fire, that thou mayest be rich, and white raiment, that thou mayest be clothed, and the shame of thy nakedness do not appear, and anoint thine eyes with eye salve, that they may see. As many as I love, I rebuke and chasten. Be zealous, therefore, and repent. I don't think I need to say any more on that. I think the Lord's words are weighty enough. Weighty enough. I mentioned before about keeping your heart with all diligence. That's an important thing for us to do every day. Don't let a day go by unless you are putting guards around your heart. This world is a hostile place to a Christian who wants to live by the truth of the Bible. It's a hostile place. And there's very subtle ways the Lord can bring you undone. Psalm 62 verse 10 says, if riches increase, set not your heart upon them. It's so easy, isn't it, to set your heart on those things, to make them a priority. Matthew chapter 6 deals with this. Let's turn to Matthew chapter 6. Got a few moments to go, yes. That clock is right. Matthew chapter 6. In verse 24, it says there that no man... Oh, sorry, you're there. Matthew 6, verse 24. No man, verse 24, can serve two masters. Now we say that women can do several things at once, and I believe that's probably pretty right. Men can only do one thing at once. It's one advantage to that, I guess. No man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. You know, you can't serve the things of the world and say, well, I want to serve God as well. It's a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. You can't do it. It's either one or the other. You know, it's two choices on the shelf. Please God or please self. That's the only two choices we have each day. And look, I'm not preaching down at you, I'm preaching myself here as well. This is very relevant to me. And there's people who come around and say, well, isn't it wonderful? Gain is godliness. Oh, isn't that wonderful? Gain is godliness. You can want your Mercedes, you can want your great big flash house, you can go for it, and God will bless you with all those wonderful things. I remember a man who said to his congregation, the Lord's going to give me a Mercedes Benz. The Lord's going to give me one. I'm believing by faith. Well, it didn't turn up. He didn't turn up. So he went to his parents and he said, can you loan me some money for a Mercedes Benz? So they gave him the money for a Mercedes Benz, more fool then. And so here he walks up at church with this Mercedes Benz. See, God's blessings. Hypocrite. There. Anyway, there you go. How subtle our hearts are. 1 Timothy 6 says, godliness with contentment is great gain. That's where the gain is. You know, we tend to look at the world and we think, oh, wow. Look, we went to a garage sale yesterday. This bloke had this huge house and he's had this huge shed and he had this huge pool and he had this great big yard and flash cars. And I think, oh, boy, What a sad story here. How sad. You know, he thinks he's got great gain. I see he's got great loss. Great loss. Godliness with contentment is great gain, and says having food and raiment therewith to be content in 1 Timothy chapter 6. Now, I'm sure each one of us would just like a little bit more than that. Maybe a house and a car. And God says, as long as you've got food and clothing, that's enough. And we're in a very, very wealthy country. And that's why it's so hard when you go out in the streets and you start trying to talk to people, or your letterbox, try to talk to people about the Lord. The Sunshine Coast is full of millionaires. Do they want to know about God? No, they've got their big credit cards, they've got their checkbook. No, checkbooks are out now, but anyway. They've got money, they've got shares, they've got all this stuff. They don't need God. I don't need God. What do I need God for? They need God. Amen. They need God. I love Colossians chapter 3. If ye then be risen with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ sitteth on the right hand of God. Set your affection of your heart on things above, not on things on the earth, for ye are dead, and your life is hid with Christ in God. And so that's where our heart, and this is the battle, it's a battle every day, to set your affections on things above, not on things on the earth. You know, the earth is so appealing, so lovely, but the better things are in heaven. Apostle Paul was a great example. He said, I die daily. That's what we've got to do, folks. We've got to die daily. Yeah, when I was a brand new Christian, I'd get up in the morning and say, Lord, where I was a bit haphazard in my Bible reading at this time, and I said, Lord, where would you have me read today? He said, Romans chapter 6. And I'd get up the next morning and say, where would you have me read today? I said, Romans chapter 6. What about next day? Romans chapter 6. And then he took me on to Colossians chapter 3. And those beautiful chapters. Romans chapter 6 is all about dying to self, but identifying with the death and the burial and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And it's all about him. I am crucified with Christ, nevertheless I live. Yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. That's Galatians 2:20. Yeah, Paul said, I die daily. He said, for me to live is Christ and to die is gain. And he's a great example. And so really, just to summarise up the book of Deuteronomy, don't forget God's blessings. Don't forget his benefits. The benefits are immeasurable. Just salvation alone and the way he worked in your life individually to bring you to Christ, to bring you to Calvary, to bring you to the cross and look at Jesus and ask yourself, why was he there for me? Don't forget those. Don't forget your blessings each day. Don't forget that whatever you've got doesn't belong to you. It's God's. It belongs to God. You're just a steward. We're stewards of what God's given us. And don't get carried away with your own successes. Oh, I made a great deal there, or did a good business deal. Every good gift and every perfect gift cometh down from the Father of lights, in whom is no variableness nor shadow of turning. Humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, and he shall exalt you in due time. My biggest challenge on a daily basis, and I dare say some of you, is pride that rises up. I'm doing pretty well. I'm doing okay. I'm going all right. Not like that other fellow over there. Oh man, I'm doing good. I need to, and you need to give credit to who's doing that, who's giving you the grace to do good. I love chapter 5 of Ephesians. It says, giving thanks, this is the key, a thankful heart. Giving thanks always for all things unto God. So it says, giving thanks for all things. I think it's in 1 Thessalonians, it says, giving thanks in all things, but here it says, giving thanks for all things. So giving thanks always for all things unto God and the Father in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. When did people be thankful? This is the problem with Israel, that they were not thankful. They forgot God. They forgot that God had blessed them. They forgot that God had brought them out of Egypt. They forgot that God had taken them through the wilderness. They forgot that God had bring them into this promised land. They forgot him. And they lived with the consequences. So let's, Brother Marsh, will you finish as pray as we finish up this morning, please?
Lord, we are grateful for our salvation.